Joe Biden's policies have led to the worst inflation in generations. People in the 2nd District can't afford gas, groceries, or even find baby formula. The Biden administration's reckless spending is to blame for record inflation, and it needs to stop. We need to focus on increasing domestic energy supplies, getting people back into the workforce, reducing government red tape, and saying no to the runaway spending policies pushed by Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi. I've been a pro-life advocate my entire life, and I will always stand up for life and protecting the unborn. The Dobbs case rightfully returned the issue of abortion back to the states where it belongs. Prior to the decision, I always voted for federal policies that allowed for exceptions for life of the mother and for rape and incest. And should similar bills come before me in Congress, I would support those policies again. We must support our law enforcement officers to the fullest extent possible and stop the Democrats' efforts to defund the police. Nancy Pelosi and the squad continue to advocate for policies that take cops off the streets and resources out of our law enforcement's hands. Every state is also a border state now, and we must stop the millions of illegal immigrants, the illegal drugs and fentanyl, and human traffickers who are streaming across our border. I will continue to support policies that strengthen support for our brave men and women in blue and help keep our communities here in St. Louis and the greater region safe. Efforts by the Biden administration and their liberal allies to fundamentally reshape America as we know it, oftentimes without the support or the consent of the American people, is probably the greatest threat to our fundamental democratic republic. Whether it is trying to federalize all our nation's election processes, limiting our Second Amendment rights with unconstitutional restrictions, trying to eliminate the fossil fuels that power our economy, or using the power of big tech to restrict our First Amendment freedoms of speech, our core values are being undermined and destroyed by the Biden administration, the mainstream media, and their liberal partners in state and local government. Joe Biden is trying to govern by pen and phone through executive order and the administrative state. It must stop. America needs an all-of-the-above energy policy that includes both existing energy resources and investments in alternative fuel sources. Just a few short years ago, our nation was energy independent and was even able to be a net exporter of energy to other nations. We need to get back to that independence with a commitment to clean coal, expansion of nuclear energy, liquid natural gas, and fracking. In areas of the country where it is feasible, advance hydro, wind, and solar power sources too. The Biden administration's efforts to kill American energy independence has caused massive inflation and huge increases in our energy and gas costs for all Missourians. We need to return to an all-of-the-above strategy and make America energy independent again. The recent leak of a draft opinion from the Supreme Court has been the biggest threat to undermining integrity in the court in its history. It is unfathomable to me that someone in that institution, someone entrusted with the most sensitive and private of deliberations, would leak that to the media for political gain. The individual who leaked that draft needs to be found, and depending on who the person is and how it was received, either criminally charged, removed from the legal community, or fired from their position. Only by taking this action can we start to restore integrity in the court and its deliberations. I also have grave concerns the Democrats are trying to upend our Constitution and pack the court, especially in the face of the violent threats the justices have faced. The First Amendment enshrines so many of the basic rights we take for granted each day. The right to speak how we want, the right to worship how we want, the right to petition our government, the right to a free press, and the right to gather and assemble as we see fit. The First Amendment is, at its core, what separates us from other democratic nations that cannot match our freedoms and God-given rights. Without the first, most of the other amendments would not serve our republic as intended. For my movies, I'd have to say when I was growing up, it was Mary Poppins. When my children, my three wonderful children, were growing up, it was The Sandlot. And now I'd say it's probably a tie between Braveheart or the new Top Gun movie. My favorite book is Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice. As someone who grew up in the 80s, I would have to go with the 80s music genre. Bands like Queen, Journey, Fleetwood Mac, and The Police.